And today is the last and the final day of the two-day G20 Summit. Yesterday, a lot of key decisions were made at the summit. In a nutshell, the G20 leaders saw a productive day one. There you can say UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak with Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Rajghat, New Delhi. These are the live visuals that we're getting here. All the leaders have started to gather at the Rajghat. That's UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Now, the important decisions taken on the first day of the summit included adoption of the New Delhi Leadership Declaration, announcement of a mega India-West Asia-Europe Economic Corridor, and induction of the African Union as permanent member of the Group of 20. But what will be on the agenda for today's meet? We'll tell you about that. Now, in the early hours between 8, as I mentioned, and 10 leaders and heads of delegations, they've started to arrive at Rajghat. They will now pay their respects to Mahatma Gandhi. At this venue, they will sign on the peace wall inside the leaders' lounge as well. Moreover, there will be a live performance of Mahatma Gandhi's favorite devotional songs as well. That's Joko Widodo that you can see there with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. These are the live visuals that we're getting. Now, after visiting Rajghat, all the leaders and heads of delegations will depart for the Bharat Mandapam, the venue of this year's G20 Summit. At the Bharat Mandapam, there will be a symbolic tree plantation event as well. The leaders will plant different saplings of different trees that have been brought in specially from their native countries. These tree saplings will represent the different countries attending the summit as well. After that, the third session of the summit, One Future, will take place at the Bharat Mandapam. In addition to all of these events, before all of the leaders and heads of delegations depart from India on the sidelines of the summit, they will also carry out bilateral meetings with each other. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also scheduled to hold key bilaterals with leaders of various nations. These include France, Comoros, Turkey, UAE, South Korea, Brazil and Nigeria. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will also have a pull aside with Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of the summit. Well, let's shift our focus for now. We have with us for more details on this. We have with us Jessica Stone, Voice of America correspondent, joining us live. We're also being joined right now with our esteemed guest, Edward P. Joseph, Senior Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies and Foreign Policy Analyst, joining us on the show right now. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Good to be back.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us as well. Jessica, with the unanimous acceptance of the joint declaration and then the big announcement of India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, what's your take on how the United States has positioned itself at the G20 summit?
Well, I think the White House is going home pretty happy that not only there was an early communique showing the unity of the G20, but that the G20 has really been reinvigorated by what's happened during the two-day meeting. There was many questions around the West in particular about the relevance of the G20. Can this be the body that can solve some of these problems, particularly those impact low-income economies? Is China going to be the only answer to funding some of those big projects? Are we going to give them other choices around the world, particularly in the context of the World Bank and the IMF? Are we going to reform these institutions to better serve the broader global economy? And I think definitely the White House is going home, actually not home, on to Vietnam with the idea that the G20 is relevant, that the differences can be overcome in a pretty unwieldy group of countries that are now G21, not just G20. And that addition, of course, is very key to the outreach that India has led to the global South, and something that the U.S. government has backed.
Right, absolutely. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we have with us Edward P. Joseph, Senior Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. He's a foreign policy analyst as well. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Same question to you. What is your take on how the United States has positioned itself at the G20 summit?
Well, I think on those issues, the economic issues and the issues relating to green transition, that yes, this was a success. It did prove that the G20 is relevant. It also comes after the recent BRICS meeting, and it shows that there is an alternative venue, an alternative means and mechanism for countries in the global South to work with more developed countries the United States and the European Union in that kind of an environment, and that they can make headway. But we have to confront the reality, of course, that politically this was not a great success for the United States, of course, and this is because the G20 actually moved backwards on the single most critical security question threatening not just Europe, but really the world, with implications for, in particular, the continent of Africa, with threats to, once again, to grain exports, to implications for rising energy prices. This is, of course, due to Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And unfortunately, no matter how much the Biden administration tries to spin it, this statement was not encouraging. This was a step backwards from the Bali Declaration, watered down, and really for no explanation. The Indian foreign minister tried to say, well, you know, things have happened since Bali. Now, what is the only thing that's happened is that Vladimir Putin's brutality has become more evident and the implications for the world more serious. So on that score, it was a setback. But of course, the G20 is primarily an economic organization. And for India, this was a success for its leadership. Please.
Right. Let's also talk about the corridor. Now, how does this corridor compare to China's efforts on infrastructure development around the world, known as the Belt and Road Initiative? Sir, what's your take on this?
Well, I think in terms of infrastructure, this definitely was a success, but we don't have the details. It's one thing at a major conference like this for there to be an endorsement of new corridors, new shipping lanes. It's quite another to follow through with the type of commitment. In this case, though, this is encouraging. It comes at a quite opportune time for the U.S. and EU to work with the G20 on these type of issues, because China's economy, of course, is faltering. And so we will have to see. China, in all likelihood, will have to cut back on this ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, and that creates opportunities for the U.S., the European Union, Japan, South Korea to work together with the rest of the countries within G20 to actually realize some of these commitments. But we have to remember, this is a 37-page communique, and the word that is used here very often is hortatory. These are grandiose commitments and expressions. In a lot of respect, they do have meaning. They're significant in the fact that the commitments are made, but we have to wait and see that they're actually funded and that the countries come together to realize them. Please.
Right. Jessica, coming to you now, what's your take on what Mr. Joseph has had to say on it being maybe a setback for the United States?
I think he makes a really important point that your audience needs to hear, because I know that, certainly this is a win for India, but in the West and in particular in the U.S. government, it is a real challenge, and there will be much criticism of the steps that the U.S. took, as he rightly points out, to agree to this. This continues to be a threat not only to security in the region, but also to the economies of the global South. So that's a concern that we have to keep at the fore when it comes to taking a stand on this issue.
All right. Well, Mr. Joseph and Jessica, thank you so much for joining us for your insights on this.
Pleasure.
Now, for more on this, we're also being joined by Molly Gambhir and Gambhir Singh, coming live from the Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi, getting us all the updates from ground. Thank you so much for joining us. And now, Molly, we saw the leaders arriving at Rajghat. To begin with, talk to us about the agenda for the day and the bilaterals that have been planned for the day.
Well, Haim, let's just first talk about the very fact that Day 2 of the G20 Summit comes with a lot of expectations. Also, the very fact that Day 1 was a huge success, given that there was 100% consensus as far as the joint agreement is concerned. When the Indian Prime Minister announced that there was consensus among the member countries, including on the issue of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, that in itself was a huge breakthrough as far as the negotiations are concerned. So looking ahead into Day 2, like you just said, said, the leaders have been at Rajghat, and now as we talk about the commencement of the session 3, which is One Future, remember Vasudev Kutumbakam being the overarching theme of India's G20 presidency, One Earth, One Family, One Future. So the two sessions that were held yesterday, One Earth, One Family, and today One Future being the session that we will be looking at. And the very fact that the Indian G20 presidency has brought on board the member countries in the way that it has, and what it means for India's place on the global map and for its rising global stature has been lauded by the member countries as well, and the spirit of inclusivity that India has strongly laid emphasis on.
Right. Now, Bhairavi, coming to you, of course, we have to talk about the Delhi Declaration as well. India managed to get everyone on the same page. What would you say were the key highlights of this declaration?
Well, I just want to, talk a little bit about the news that's developed, how India really got Russia and China on board.
Right.
For the declaration. And if you can shut the phone back to me, because I can hear myself in the voice. Indian officials have worked around the clock to get Russia and China on board for this joint declaration. Remember, at all the other summits before this, there was always the Ukrainian president either available virtually or actually invited on those events. India categorically said that we are not going to have Zelensky virtually either. This is something that played well with Russia. China also wanted concessions in the sense that they did not want Russia named in the resolution, the draft resolution for the joint communique. We know now that the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar also met Sergey Lavrov in Jakarta, which also led to a breakthrough. Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia and India worked closely with all the G20 countries to come to this consensus. We know that NSA Doval also met several leaders personally. So all of these things really worked in India's favor to come to that draft resolution.
Right. Now, Molly, what is your assessment of how India has positioned itself with the declaration, its priorities as a voice of the global south?
Well, remember, India's push for inclusivity and for getting the countries on board has been something that has been the overarching theme and something that we have been discussing throughout as well. A bit of a voice audio glitch at this point, as I can constantly hear my voice back. But beyond the point that we've been trying to make when it comes to India's push for inclusivity and the very fact that India has laid emphasis on these themes in the way that it has.
Right. Now, Bhairavi, coming back to you, what are the plans for the spouses today? Any interesting engagements that have been planned for them?
Right. Haim, the thing is that the spouses are, out on a little bit of a trip to New Delhi. They're going to be at the National Modern Art Gallery, believe. They're going to be at the Humayun Tomb and all the way to the Qutub Minar as well, we believe. And they're being protected, of course, by the paramilitary forces. There's a huge blanket of security cover in Delhi for the delegation and the leaders as well. Over 130,000 security officials. So this is going to be a bit of a security nightmare, but I think that there's a lot of color happening at the gala dinner. We saw a lot of the leaders in Indian saris and Indian wear. We saw the IMF chief in a suit. Ajay Banga's wife was in a sari. Akshata Murthy was Indian clothes. And several of the other leaders were also leaders and spouses were also Indian clothes. We do really want this echo to be fixed in our ear at the moment because it's really playing into what we're saying.
All right, we will surely fix that, Bhairavi. Thank you so much for getting us all the updates, and Molly, thank you to you as well. We will, of course, continue to track the developments closely through the day. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.